Well, thank you, and well, a fantastic world of topics out there. We just talked about Volti. We're now looking at a real fundamental thing about telecommunication, which is number, and within that, number verification. I think there's a little joke within our group at MEF that I find this super exciting. I don't know if it's a nerd inside me, but I do believe it is my favorite topic, believe it or not, of all of them. And you heard me saying that before. So a big thank you for Net Number for allowing me to talk about number verification again, from sponsoring today, so thank you. And now I see we have our the magic four that are going to help us to understand a bit more, as Chris was saying, what's about number, but also validity of numbers, because not all numbers are made the same. So we are going to be welcoming here Kathleen Badea, the VP of Product Management for Net Number. Thanks, Kathleen. The second chair for you. And then Tonis Kirsipu, the Head of Global Connectivity MS Center. Thank you, Tonis. Scott Warner, the Director of Emerging Services and CPaaS at SNBTS. And then Katia Gonzalez, join us from VIX, the Head of Global Transactional Security. Thank you, all four of you. I'm going to take a chair here as well and sit down. As I said, I want to look you in the face. This is an interesting topic for me. But I gave potentially a very rudimentary introduction to what is. Before we go to the use cases and what it does, can you tell us what the announcing the routing mean in your world? I'll start with Kathleen and we'll go all the way to Katia. So what's the definition? What is this thing of enhanced routing? What do you do with enhanced routing?
Sure.
Or routing, I should say.
Yeah, you think by now when it comes to routing SMS or voice, this would be a solved problem. But I still think it isn't really. We still see everyday situations where players in the market, they don't optimally route their messaging or their voice traffic. And just to give you a few examples, almost on a weekly basis, we have customers that are working with us to improve the granularity of the data for some MVNOs or for some new carriers that show up in the ecosystem. You might say, maybe that carrier or that MVNO has only, 0.5% of a market share somewhere, but for our customers, it's important to be able to identify the numbers belonging to that operator and route accurately. Or, for example, in the US, where we have a specific footprint there are still services out there that don't allow users to sign up with text-enabled phone numbers that can otherwise work as a mobile number, but they are a little specific in terms of the implementation, and not everyone is using the right data to identify and correctly route to those numbers. So I think that's one aspect in terms of routing. And then what we see now more and more, most customers, they are not happy with just the routing data anymore. It's going much more in the fraud prevention space. Fraud is obviously a big topic. I think there wasn't a presentation today that didn't mention it one way or another. So, how can we be sure that the transaction is legitimate, the number is valid, the reputation of a number is good, and so on and so forth.
Well, you just mentioned fraud, so I'm going to jump directly then to Katia, because as your title and your history suggest, you have been working against fraud for a long time. So for you, enhanced routing, is that part of your fraud arsenal? What's happening there? What is it?
Yeah, I think, so routing is actually a foundational element into the quality and the fraud prevention, eventually. So one of the reasons there's so much search of fraud lately is we are getting to a situation we had on voice services a few years ago, LCR, least cost routing. So we are trying to optimize, we as an industry tend to try to optimize so much the costs that we end up routing to parties that to propose such a low cost need to, find creative ways, strategies. And one of these very creative activities is going to be the fraud, not terminate the traffic and still get paid for it. So that's one of the ways that, LCR, very low costs, are funded. And this is why it's so important to know, to have right intelligence about numbers, to know how to route those numbers, and on top of it, have a good view, deep view, on which are the numbers that are being used for fraud. So it's all quite intertwined. It's a little bit complicated because we all need to optimize costs, but it shouldn't be done at the cost of, the customer experience.
Okay. So far, we already heard some of the interpretation going from, well, Kathleen Kappel, but certainly the optimization and cost, which added by Katya as well, but that could turn into fraud element as well. Well, let me check if there is any value, because Tony's Mesente represents the SME market out there. All of this stuff, is it any relevance for them? Is there something that they need to know or do?
That's actually an interesting topic when, preparing for this panel as well. Initially, I thought that, how much value I can bring to this regarding talking number validity, and because it's, like Kaita said, it's a foundational thing. In message routing, I think everybody is using, every aggregator is using it, and it's essential. But now, for our end, we are seeing it can also become a little bit like a standalone product, as number validity, understanding what the user base is, is it a good user base? Because as we are working with smaller and medium-sized companies who, even more often than not, they're just starting, they're just adopting SMS. So their number pool that they have collected opt-in might not be super good. The quality is not ideal. There may be a lot of inactive numbers. So we actually push our customers to check their databases on a routine level. And interestingly enough, this is, I can't say in terms of revenue, but in terms of growth percentage, this toolset has been one of the fastest growing tools in our arsenal at this point in time.
So we've got already 3 different perspectives. I'm simplifying again, from margin cost to potentially, find out the route itself, to check where it's coming from, I would almost say, the fraud side. And what you're saying is where it's going to. So your database, is that, are you spending money to send it to people that don't exist or things like that? So this is turning into a really particularly good arsenal. So let's see if I can also find it, even in Scott, SMBTS, specifically, yeah. there is an S part, which is a mobile operator in the SMBTS. What's the MNO view of this bit?
Yeah, so I think, as you mentioned, we're owned by, we're a joint venture between SoftBank and BTS, so we're in this quite unique position between a mobile operator and really a wholesale player. So what we see is, one of my main areas is also on the enterprise side. So one of the fundamentals of SMS messaging that I always found quite an unusual prospect was that you talk to an enterprise and you say, okay, you're going to pay for all of the messages that you submit to my platform. And they say, hey, but 10% of these messages failed. And you say, yeah, sorry about that, but you're still going to pay for them. So I look at it from the enterprise perspective, which is this kind of unusual proposition that we've always just sat with for the last 10 years about A2P messaging, which is you submit a message and you pay for that. We're now looking at, and in partnership with NetNumber in some areas and in some regions, we're looking at how can we use number validity to really improve our SMS service, to say to those customers, hey, you only have to pay for SMS that gets delivered, because we're really cleaning this for you. And this overlaps with all of the presentations today about AIT, it overlaps with the fraud area as well, where we're trying to say, hey, enterprise customer, let's get back on to the SMS train. This is a service that works. This is a service that can be commercially viable for you. And then, of course, we're also a part of a mobile operator in SoftBank in Japan. So we want to protect our subscribers, and we want to ensure a service for our subscribers. So a really simple example is when you look at one-time password delivery, we have customers or subscribers of the network that have problems receiving one-time password from certain enterprises. And that's because the number validity has worked in kind of the opposite way, which is there's numbers that are not able to receive a message because of inaccuracies within the data.
So here we go. 4 use cases, and that's just the beginning, I think. Maybe I should ask if you can think of anything else right now. But this is a sexy topic, which is really the unsung hero. I believe all of you are smiling. You're agreeing with me, right? Okay. Well, it's part of a sexy topic, but it's not talked about very much. Should it be talked about? Do we need to educate the market out there? Is there a reason to tell, we talk about SMEs, but enterprises themselves, how important these things is? I don't know if it's controversial, but it's for Katalin. Katalin, should we all start to do a bit more of education out there about the importance of validity of phone numbers?
Yeah, I would say so. I think a lot actually happened behind the scenes for the last few years already, and the topic of cost optimization is not new, the topic of fraud prevention is not new, but a couple of things change in the market, and in particular, we've seen the cost increase in SMS and the IT traffic projection. So there are a few things that switch this from a nice-to-have topic to a must-have topic, I would say. And it was maybe a technical discussion so far, but what's changing is that those entities which are the front end to the enterprises and the CPaaS providers in the end, they've recognized that enterprises might not be always educated or might not have the tools or the bandwidth, the resources to implement such tools on their own. So as we've heard already from my colleagues here, I think that CPaaS already came up with different solutions, and they identified that in terms of helping the enterprises avoid fraud and optimize routing, it's almost like a value-added service that they can offer through their platform and make the relationship with the customer sticky and more profitable long-term in the end.
And Tony, when you talk about to the SMEs, you say this is now a hot thing that you're selling. How are you selling it? They come to you, or do you have to go and explain to them the importance of doing that?
The driver is one of the main topics discussed today here as well. Your favorite word.
Which one?
Pricing.
Oh, no, that is not that I'm not allowed. He didn't say that.
So that is the main driver of understanding of where you're actually spending the money, because everybody wants to have the best possible ROI. And, this is where the validity comes in. Of course, it comes with its own challenges, and it's difficult to comment perhaps how SoftBank in Japan is, how open they are with that data that they're actually giving out. But that comes in different regions, has its own challenges. So we can't say that it's a silver bullet for global 194 markets that, yes, we're going to go to net number and everything magically works. We know exactly if that number is online, offline, or valid or allocated, right? So it's one tool in the arsenal, and it's becoming more and more, and I don't want to say popular, but more and more essential, just because of what the global market in pricing is actually going. We have reached the top, in my opinion. And that's also the reason why the enterprise, even the smaller ones, they need to optimize more. So we are not working with enterprises that are like hyperscalers who come into the aggregation scene with targets that are 50% of market rate. But at the same time, they do need to optimize their costs month over month.
Say, lovely, optimize their cost. That's how I can say that. And that seems to be a great way to get those to respond to you. The education is, here is a value we're going to be doing. And Tony, you were mentioning how markets are different, and so I'll take that for Scott as well. Because you deal with a specific market. I mean, probably we might need half an hour to explain what the Japanese market is. But in terms of education, share a bit of what's behind that market specifically.
Yeah, I think the Japanese market is a little bit unique when it comes to number validity and things like number portability, which those of you who are in kind of the day-to-day messaging business might be aware of that internationally. That creates a lot of complexity when it comes to routing. But what it also creates for us and for others in the market is an opportunity, because this number validity topic, I think when we look at the market 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, we were very much transactional. So the SMS business within global aggregators was very much, okay, who can get a price and who gets a message, and we're all pipes basically between ideally a mobile operator or probably something and something, right? We're a black box in the middle. Whereas now, this kind of concept of, can we identify whether a number is valid? First step. Can we identify whether a number is active? And if we think about Europe, that's maybe a bad example, but there's many markets, especially across Asia, that we're working very actively in, that have, for example, multiple SIM cards, or they have potentially issues with connectivity. And the point being, why would you pay for a message that's delivered to a handset that's not switched on? And we're now looking at, okay, this is a real value add for us as an industry, and for us as a business, as my background is with SMS aggregators, we're doing something a little bit more clever than what we were doing a few years ago. So I see this as that data improves, and the work that NetNumber and others are doing in the market, we're really on kind of a road here towards SMS becoming a much more legitimate channel again, after kind of being beaten for the last 2 years. Yeah.
Some positive. Maybe if I could, Katja, you can reflect on education, but should we say a couple of words, as you're a carrier or carriers, so say, about the aggregators word? Should we educate them as well? How well understood is that across the value chain?
Absolutely. I mean, I see I have 1 minute and a half.
Don't look at that. This is my favorite topic, so I'm not looking. You see, you have your time. So.
Yeah, I mean, we are not anymore these black boxes that Scott was talking about. We have a role to play in making communications efficient, qualitative, and fraud-free, because that's my thing. But so we have that role to enrich our role. We need to be more than just a pipe, a dumb pipe, and we have the means to be more than that. We can deliver a service that is enriched, where we know which are the numbers that need to be routed, which are the numbers that don't need to be routed, that have to be stopped. I have an example, very recent, from last week, where an African operator, they saw a surge in, they are not clear yet, but it was clearly, I mean, it was fraud. They are yet seeing what exactly. So they started to see that a high number of MOs, so messages outgoing from end users in that country, to supposedly activate iMessage applications, were being sent to supposedly UK-based Apple servers. And there were a couple of issues here. So for a start, the activations didn't work. So they didn't get, the users would not get the messages in return with the activation code, so they couldn't activate the application. And then, on the other side, there were also non-iOS customers that were trying to activate iMessage. So it's already a little bit weird, but that comes with a little bit of investigation. You don't always know the kind of handset that a user has, or you don't always analyze on this. So what we saw is that these UK numbers, and it's a very small range, 100 numbers, they are properly allocated to a big MNO in UK, so these numbers are proper, are supposed to be in use. But what we saw at BICS is that since 2022, all the numbers, except for one, are blacklisted because they carry fraudulent activity. So it's extremely important to come to my roots.
Yes.
So, of course, number intelligence is essential, is foundational, also for intermediate players, aggregators. It is the part of the core of our business, to route properly any voice call, any message. But also it has to be enriched with fraudulent intelligence, because otherwise we miss out. Numbers, proper numbers are misused. And the fraud guys are extremely smart to, twist things that are proper in this industry and twist them and get them spoiled.
There we go. 4 big champions for VR. You heard 4 different use cases, 4 different perspectives our people out there should be interested, and even could be economically advantageous for you as well as for your customers to use it. We don't have time because the time is up, but I'm still asking you if you have quick questions, any of you. Any questions for our, no, they were so good. As a matter of fact, I think we should give it a big round of applause to thank them for all the things. So thank you, Katja, thank you, Scott, Konis, and thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start with thanking Dario and Susan for having me here today. And just to share a little bit, I'm extra happy to be here because yesterday I was skiing in Kitzbühel, and coming down the mountain I got a double flat tire. But now the kids are safely back home and the car is in the workshop. So, and I'm here, so all good, all good. All right. Let's see if this works. Oh yeah, the recipe for business messaging adoption is today's theme. Start a bit with an intro of the topic, look at some key considerations, then look at the value chain perspective and the ecosystem. Obviously we're at MEF, so we have to look at the ecosystem perspective. And then me and Nick will do a Q&A at the end. So this was today's theme, and ultimately the final part here. What do we as an industry need to do to ensure that business messaging in all its glory takes its rightful place in the customer engagement firmament? Someone very eloquent put that together. But really, what do we need to make business messaging happen in an even bigger way than it has already? And for me, it's really about fostering the next S-curve. SMS has had a fantastic run over the past 20 years. Growth is slowly slowing. It's still growing, but it's not at all like it was 5-10 years ago when it was really exploding. At the same time, we have, I would say, predominantly WhatsApp and RCS, which holds great promise for the future. And I believe these are the two ecosystems that will be dominating the next generation of messaging, especially outside some key Asian markets. We have good growth already today on WhatsApp, and we see early signs on RCS. And then obviously with Apple's announcement a couple of months ago, I think that's a real game changer. So I believe that's what we will be looking at in the future here. But what do we need to do as an industry to make this happen? First of all, we need to realize that brands face very different challenges depending on what it is they do or their customer does. So based on the use case, geography, different countries are very, very different. And ultimately demographics. Who is the customer of the brands? These kind of three dimensions are totally formatting for the challenge that an enterprise faces. If we start with the use case, there are 4 main CPaaS use cases. You have marketing. You have something called, that I've chosen here to call utility. I'm using Meta's nomenclature. So it's also called service delivery, notifications, alerts, reminders. Those little messages that kind of makes a service work. Don't forget your appointment tomorrow. Here's the code to pick up your package. Those kind of things. Then you have at the base, you have authentication. So 2-factor authentication is a huge SMS use case, as all of you know. And then last but not least, we have care, which today doesn't really exist in SMS. This is when a user initiates contact with the brand, and this has so far been the home of contact centers and web chat. But I believe with the next generation of messaging, will also come into this space, and it's a great growth opportunity. And these use cases, if you look at, this is data from Mobile Squared, if you look at global SMS today, it splits like this between the 3 use cases or use case families. But they will have very different kind of evolution paths. So the market is going to fragment much more than everything is SMS, even though the underlying purpose of the SMS is very different. So authentication partly will move off the SIM card altogether. into WebAuthn and IDP, things that our chairman, Andrew Budd, is very engaged in with his company, iProve. Part of it will move into voice, very much cost-driven. Part of it will move into silent network authentication, so dedicated APIs that the mobile operators provides to do specifically user authentication. And part of it will move into business-initiated conversational channels, so predominantly WhatsApp, RCS, and Viber. It needs to be business-initiated because that's the flow of a verification, as opposed to user-initiated, which is the requirement for something like Apple Messages for Business or Facebook Messenger. They're not fit for purpose for verification. If you look at marketing and utility, they won't leverage the top 3 channels here, but rather the 4th. And obviously, there's huge promise to kind of improve the customer experience for these type of use cases. And then customer care will enter this space. That's a huge growth opportunity for I would say, messaging. And obviously, they will leverage the various conversational channels that are out there. If you look at mobile operators, they own this part where they provide service to brands. Obviously, today, there's limited monetization on Flash Call, and RCS is kind of co-created together with Google. But this is where the operators play in the future. So they will no longer have a monopoly in messaging, but will have a very meaningful share of the market. The other part is obviously the OTT providers, with all the new channels that are, well, emerging is probably the wrong word, that are today established for business messaging. Transformation drivers. One is the increasing SMS cost that I'm sure has been talked about here today, which is coinciding with the emergence of affordable options. And on the back of these cost increases, you have SMS fraud, especially artificial inflation of traffic on the rise, in specific emerging markets. It's important to note, it's specifically on authentication, the cross-border portion of that, in certain emerging markets. So the part of the market that's being hit by this is less than 10% of total market. But at the same time, I don't want to diminish the problem. It's a real issue. But just to put it in perspective. And depending on the enterprise use case, they will ultimately in the future choose a different mix of channels. Let's look at the next dimension, which is geography. 3 countries, Brazil, Germany, America. The green bar is WhatsApp penetration. The 2 yellow ones is Android and iOS. And the blue ones are transactional, where I've combined 2FA or verification and utility and marketing between the different markets. The green and yellow here is market data. The blue is from Sinch. But I think we have enough of a market share for this to be relatively representative. If you then look at this, Brazil has high WhatsApp penetration and high Android penetration. So basically, an Android is a proxy for RCS, of course. So, and this has resulted in Brazil being, I would say, together with India, one of the most mature markets there is for conversational messaging. We see a lot of traction on both WhatsApp and RCS here. Germany, reasonable penetration, but the very high SMS price has kind of hampered the market for non-critical use cases. So marketing is only 8% in Germany. If you take a Western European comparison, at least for Sinch, the number is 35%. And those are very comparable markets from a buying power perspective. So marketing would be a net new addition in Germany, similar to customer care was for the whole market, which will make it more difficult to get going. It's not just moving use cases. Also, there's some hesitancy among bigger enterprises around privacy and WhatsApp. So even though there's decent penetration, we haven't really seen takeoff in Germany. Question is, will RCS be able to change this, since it's an operator-led technology? We'll see. America. We already have conversational use cases happening today on SMS, very much driven by the fact that America SMS is quite affordable. We also have quite a bit of rich content being sent, thanks to America being the only market where MMS has a meaningful position as a channel. So I would say the prerequisites in the US of brands being both, have tinkered with conversational messaging and rich messaging means it's a market that has a lot of promise. The one thing that's lacking is coverage. So RCS and WhatsApp is low here. So I think it's well known, WhatsApp is targeting America forcefully, trying to grow the base. And with Apple's decision to support RCS, all of those 58% of iOS users, I believe, will ultimately be eligible to be messaged with on RCS. So I have high hopes for the US market when it comes to this. Last but not least, demographics, know your customer. This is not all-encompassing. I just took a couple of data points to make the point. Every user is unique, lots of different preferences. Medium age difference between Japan and Nigeria is 32 years. That's huge. So what works in Japan will definitely not work in Nigeria and vice versa.
Creating the networks to kind of CPaaS providers and let's call them application service providers or cloud platforms that provide the software that the brands need.
Have a much
All of us have parts to play here.
Than the rest of the country, obviously because there are ties to Latin America where WhatsApp
Let's look at building the foundation. What do the networks
but the brand ultimately
need to do?
to succeed with mobile messaging needs to
Most
understand their
important,
customer base.
coverage. The
And,
single most
we
important
as an
factor
industry
for
really
adoption. This is why one of the key reasons why SMS was so successful. 5.1 billion users you can reach with a single channel. We have 2 billion WhatsApp users today and 1 billion RCS users.
The start.
With Apple joining the party, I believe RCS will ultimately reach the same level of penetration that SMS does. So, and WhatsApp is growing steadily. So I think this will, over time, sort itself.
The mobile operators and the
Next one is cost. The brands need predictability, it needs to be affordable, and there needs to be a positive relative return on investment compared to other ways of reaching their customers, via email or what might it be.
Let's look at building the foundation.
And obviously here, the price hikes on international SMS aren't helping for the next step. So mobile operators here need to think about their pricing strategy. How will they make money on RCS and data verification? It's a topic of its own.
We have 2 billion WhatsApp users.
Next one, ease of use. How easy is it for an enterprise to leverage messaging? This will be part of their decision-making process, whether to adopt messaging as a key channel to reach their customers or not. I think maybe highlighting 2, I believe national sender ID verification on the RCS side would be helpful. WhatsApp obviously is simpler, it's one single entity controlling the entire verification flow. And the other one is just engagement analytics. I think read receipts, which have both on WhatsApp and RCS, is a huge step forward, especially for marketeers. Today, with delivery receipts, it's a little bit fire and forget on SMS. I have high hopes that marketeers will take a closer look at messaging with these new channels.
Think about their pricing strategy.
User experience, tons of new very cool features coming. I think the one that interests me the most here are payments. WhatsApp are playing with consumer-to-consumer payments in Brazil and India, and merchant payments in Singapore. Being able to transact straight out of the messaging client, I think, will be super strong. This is a couple of years ahead, I think, but it's I think it's for e-commerce this would be great. Last but not least, trust. Meta has a challenge to overcome trust when it comes to privacy, I would say. They have a history of monetizing their user data, whereas carriers obviously monetize communication traffic. So that's a challenge. RCS, on the other hand, is not end-to-end encrypted. That's a challenge for the MNOs and for Google. Both of these channels promise to help with the smishing problem that we have on SMS, thanks to the sender verification step. So that's an improvement. All of these things need to work in order to basically have great foundations, great rails upon which we then can build things in the industry. And what is it then CPaaS providers, ASPs, cloud platforms need to do? I think we need an enablement software layer. This doesn't really exist. There exist campaign platforms on SMS, but they're much simpler given SMS is more of a one-way medium outbound. I think 98% of at least Sinch's traffic is one-way only. So the enterprises need a tech stack to manage conversations and rich media. And it entails a bunch of different things. Obviously, AI-powered bots. I think that's a topic again of its own, but that's going to be huge, I think, here. You can automate a lot of things that today requires people. And then if and when the bot can't handle something, you need an inbox or an integration to a contact center so that the human agent can solve the problem for the user. I think those are key kind of components in all of this. And then underpinning all of it is an omnichannel API so that you can access the channel or the channels that the brand needs in any particular market. Obviously, very different if you're a domestic company doing business in one market only, or if you're a huge multinational bank which is in all continents. The complexity here. That's one. The other thing that needs to happen is we need to light up the software ecosystem. The world's enterprises use various types of software depending on the business they're in and what platforms they've chosen. And these are key to adoption. Even in SMS, a lot of traffic comes through these type of systems, and with conversational messaging and rich messaging, the complexity is only going to increase. Hence, brands will need more help. And I think here, CPaaS providers who have a lot of the channel expertise will need to help the software platforms in order to get this right. Either through native integrations or simple connectors.
Obviously, very different if you're a domestic company doing business in one
And I
market.
think that's it. So summing up, first of all, who, where, and what
The complexity.
is the underpinning key formatting
That's one. The other
parameters
thing that needs to
that
happen is
each business will face and will kind of specify what challenge they individually have. Then you need a solid foundation, so the mobile operators and the OTTs, especially Meta and Google, need to solve all of that we saw earlier on the blue slide. And last but not least, rails are not enough. We need APIs, purpose-built software integrations to the existing ecosystems that all of those brands already are using today to really unlock conversational messaging
and I think here, CPaaS providers
I think a Sinch, you might know we've grown a lot through acquisitions, where we have acquired companies that had this stack, either in-house or through partners. Those are the markets where we've seen the growth. Whereas other markets where we only go to market with an API today, because guess what, we haven't done all the integration that we need yet, we have a lot less traction because the enterprises need all the help from the software stack in order to leverage it. And with that, I want to say thank you.
Then
Thank you, Robert. That was very enlightening indeed. So every time I listen to you up on stage, I learn something. So thank you very much indeed. And I've also learned, in addition to business messaging, to drive carefully in Austria. That gives the answer. So we're at Q&A time. We've got 5 minutes. There's a question down there. Just while the microphone's coming over, I've got a question myself, if that's okay. So I was going to say $1 million question, but I would say $1 billion question. With respect to business messaging, in your view, and I'm going to make this harder, this question, we'll take Apple out of the equation. For you, what would be the top 3 things that the industry, the ecosystem could do to really drive business messaging forward?
We have a lot less
And there's no restrictions here.
Yeah.
From the software stack in order.
I mean, the final piece here of the software stack and also enabling the partner ecosystem, I think is the single most.
Thank you, Robert. That was very enlightening indeed. So every time I listen to you on stage, I learn something.
Well,
so thank you very much.
software stack is absolutely necessary. We kind of empirically proved it to ourselves. And so much messaging, SMS messaging, which we convert over time, is flowing through the various software ecosystems. So for me, that is the most important thing.
I was going to say $1 million question, but I would say $1 billion question.
Then I think keeping SMS a affordable and trusted channel, I would say as the second one. Again, as I said, it's a particular problem in certain markets with certain use cases, but still, you know, it's, I mean, everyone in the industry has heard about the problems with AIT, etc. And brands might not, once they put off SMS, going back to messaging might prove difficult, even though they've had problems not everywhere, but you know, having problems somewhere might suffice. I'll stick with those 2 actually as the answer.
That's great. I think one of the other things that we need to look into for the, you know, for all the members of MEF as well, is bringing those software providers, you know, into this ecosystem. I think will help everybody as well. I'm a firm believer in the fight not being in here, although we're amongst competitors, the fight is definitely out there, which we can do a better job at, I'm sure. So, sorry, there was a question.
Yeah, Mike Becker, when do you think Apple will come out? When Apple comes out with its RCS support, will it be P2P first and then A2P, or will they do them both at the same time?
The second one.
And how long is that going to take?
Again,
So this is me guessing now, just to be clear. I don't have you know, any insights into what's happening in Apple. But what I think it will be supported in iOS 18, which comes in September. If Apple, you know, if history is any guide. Also, if history is a guide, if you look at iOS adoption, how fast new iOS version are rolled out, my expectation is that 50% of iPhones will have iOS 18 come January 25, and about 80% in June 25.
I think one of our things
I
we need
think
to look
it'll
into
be fairly fast.
You know, for all the members of MEF as well, is bringing those
I think they will be
providers
supporting
into
80
this
out the gate.
ecosystem. I think will help everybody as well. I'm a firm believer.
Robert's certainly more of an expert than myself, but I would second that. That's exactly what I've heard. Second hand, I would say in the industry. I believe
So sorry, there was a question.
Yeah, it's Michael Becker. When do you think Apple will come out? When Apple comes out with its RCS support, will it be P2P first and then A2P, or will they do them both at the same time?
Okay.
And how long is that going to take?
So this is me guessing now, just to be clear. I don't have you know, any insights into what's happening in Apple. But what I think it will be supported in iOS 18, which comes in September. If Apple, you know, if history is any guide. Also, if history is a guide, if you look at iOS adoption, how fast new iOS version are rolled out, my expectation is that 50% of iPhones will have iOS 18 come January 25, and about 80% in June 25. So I think it'll be fairly fast.
Yeah, but what about P2P, A2P support?
I think they will be supporting A2P out the gate.
Robert's certainly more of an expert than myself, but I would second that. That's exactly what I've heard secondhand. I would say in the industry, I believe they're launching both at the same time in September. So quite exciting. Any more questions? No? Okay, I think we've run over ever so slightly, so we'll probably draw it to a close there. Thank you ever so much again, Robert. That was fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank
Nick.
you.